My name's Emily Work, and my review project is on the Cold War. So first we'll start out with an overview of the Cold War. The Cold War was from 1945 to 1991. Basically, this is a conflict between the United States and the USSR, also known as the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union believed that communism was better, while the United States believed that communism was the bad form of government and democracy was the best form of government. Basically, the United States believed in capitalism and the economy, which was free trade, a market economy, and individual businesses, while the USSR believed in communist government, which means a government-controlled economy. So first we'll start out with some causes of the Cold War. The first cause was the Tehran Conference. During this conference, the USSR was guaranteed the only country to liberate Eastern Europe, which further angered the Americans. Second was the Yalta Conference. This conference revealed the ideological differences between Truman and Stalin. The Soviet power in Eastern Europe led to the Iron Curtain, while the United States wanted to ensure that they could contain communism. Cause was communism. The USSR wanted to further spread communism, while the United States was trying to contain it from spreading to other countries. Lastly was the Potsdam Conference. During the Potsdam Conference, U.S. President Harry Truman demanded free elections in Eastern Europe, but Stalin refused. Stalin wanted a buffer zone between Germany and the USSR for protection against a future war. Additionally, in order to help you remember the causes of the Cold War, just think about the 4 C's: 3 conferences and communism. Next, we're going to talk about some important events of the Cold War. First, we're going to talk about the Truman Doctrine. Now, this was created in 1947 by U.S. President Harry S. Truman, which established the policy of containment, which means that the U.S. would try and contain communism. Additionally, the U.S. pledged to help any country financially who is trying to defeat communism. Next is the containment policy. The U.S. created a policy of containment in order to contain communism and stop it from spreading across Europe and to other parts of the world, as seen in the Truman Doctrine. Then we have the space race. The space race is a competition of technology between the United States and the USSR. This started in 1957 when the USSR launched the Sputnik, an orbiting satellite using long-range rockets. The United States then began to produce new technologies such as NASA in order to not be destroyed by the USSR's new technologies. Next is the Cuban Missile Crisis. Cuba became a communist country under Fidel Castro, and so the Soviets placed nuclear missiles in Cuba in range of the United States since they were allied countries. However, this scared the Americans because it gave the Soviets the opportunity to drop missiles near Florida since Cuba was in such close proximity to Florida. Another important event was the creation of the Berlin Wall. This is a wall built in 1961 to separate East and West Germany. This wall was built by the communist government of East Germany because they didn't want the Western fascists from Germany coming into their government and trying to overthrow their communist politics. Next was the Bay of Pigs invasion. In 1961, when the Cuban nationalist named Fidel Castro drove his army into Havana and overthrew the government of General Fulgencio Batista. The U.S. tried to push him out of the power, but in 1961 the CIA launched an invasion of Cuba. However, the invasion did not go well for the CIA, and Castro's troops won. Next was the Berlin Blockade/Airlift. This was an attempt in 1948 by the USSR to limit the ability of France, Britain, and the US to travel their sectors of Berlin. Eventually, the Western powers created an airlift known as the Berlin Airlift, which delivered supplies and relief to West Berlin. Next is the Vietnam War. This was an armed conflict that pitted the communist North Vietnam and its southern allies against South Vietnam and the United States. The war ended 2 years later with the unification of Vietnam under communist control after the withdrawal of the U.S. from the war. Another war was the Korean War. This was the first military action of the Cold War. When soldiers from North Korea's People's Army ran across the 30th parallel, the boundary between the Soviet-backed Democratic People's Republic of Korea to the north and the pro-Western Republic of Korea to the south was broken. Next, it's also very important that we talk about the important people of the Cold War. The first important person is Dwight E. Eisenhower. He was the 34th President of the United States from 1953 to 1961. Additionally, he was the Supreme Commander of the Allies in Western Europe during World War II, and he also led the invasion of Nazi-occupied Germany, which began D-Day. Another important president was Ronald Reagan. He was the 40th President of the United States from 1981 to 1989. During his presidency, he created the Strategic Defense Initiative, where he pursued a high-technology missile defense system. This policy helped bring a quicker end to the Cold War by negotiating about nuclear arms with the USSR. Next is Harry S. Truman. He was the President of the United States from 1945 to 1952. He created the Truman Doctrine, as stated before, which followed the policy of containment by pledging to help any other countries defeat communism. Additionally, he attended the Potsdam Conference where he demanded free elections in Eastern Europe, but Stalin refused, thus leading to the Cold War. Next was Winston Churchill. He gave his famous Iron Curtain speech in which he warned the Americans of a future conflict with the Soviet Union. Truman and many other U.S. officials received the speech in America. However, they weren't very enthusiastic about his ideas for a relationship between Britain and the U.S. The Iron Curtain symbolized a physical boundary which divided Europe into two different areas from 1945 until the end of the Cold War in 1991. Another important person is Franklin D. Roosevelt. Roosevelt was the 32nd President of the United States from 1934 to 1945. He was president through the Great Depression and World War II. During his time, he met with Soviet Premier Joseph Stalin, which was the beginning of the contradictory agreements between Stalin and Churchill at Yalta, which established a framework for the Cold War. Next, to begin our USSR leaders, is Joseph Stalin. He was the dictator of the USSR from 1929 to 1953. Under him, the Soviet Union was transformed into an industrial and military superpower. He believed that only Soviet control of Eastern Europe could ensure that there wouldn't be another world war. However, Americans saw this as a power grab, so the U.S. took actions, thus causing the Cold War. Another important person is Mikhail Gorbachev. He assumed control of the Soviet Union from 1985 to 1991. He was also General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. His efforts to make the USSR's politics were more towards democracy led to the downfall of communism and the dismemberment of the Soviet Union in 1991. Another important person is Nikita Khrushchev. He became the new leader of the USSR after Stalin died in 1953. He led the USSR during the height of the Cold War and realized that reforms were needed, which became a time of de-Stalinization. Additionally, he instituted the Cuban Missile Crisis by planting nuclear weapons 90 miles from Florida. The last person is Fidel Castro. He created the first communist state in the Western Hemisphere in Cuba in 1959. He achieved this by overthrowing the military dictatorship of Fulgencio Batista in 1959. During his reign, Cuba had a highly agnostic relationship with the U.S. This resulted in the Bay of Pigs invasion and the Cuban Missile Crisis as part of the Cold War. The last topic we're going to talk about is the results of the Cold War. So the first result is the fall of the Soviet Union. When Mikhail Gorbachev took office in 1985, he introduced two new policies which defined the USSR's relationship to the rest of the world as glasnost, or political openness, and perestroika, also known as economic reform. The Soviet influence had a decrease in Eastern Europe, and in 1989, every communist state replaced its government with a non-communist one. With a decrease in communist influence across the world, the United States no longer felt the threat of communism and spread of overtake of communism across the world. Some other important results were the fall of the Berlin Wall, and also that NATO and the Warsaw Pact were formed from the Cold War. So that concludes my lecture on the Cold War. Thank you for watching, and I hope you learned a lot about the Cold War.